Entonces vamos a empezar. Bienvenidos a todos. Muchísimas gracias.
So let's begin. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here with us today. It's such a pleasure to have you. This is the third of our series for community defenders in North Carolina on disaster response. Next slide, please, Philip. It's a pleasure to have you all here. Next.
Entonces, este es nuestra tercera sesión y esta
So this is our third session. This session is about advocating for your community's rights during a disaster.
Como ya han notado,
As you have already noticed, this meeting has interpretation, simultaneous interpretation. We want to highlight the value of language justice. We want everybody to be able to participate, including those who only speak English, those who only speak Spanish, those who are bilingual. It's very important for us to demonstrate that it is possible to have full participation from everybody.
Y las instrucciones para
The
entrar
instructions to enter the language channels for interpretation are also in the chat box.
Entonces, yo me llamo Sarah Feldman, trabajo con
My name is Sarah Feldman. I work with Forward Carolina, Rural Forward Carolina, that is. Glad to be with you.
Nuestro objetivo en esta red
Our objective in this session is to build a statewide network to support each other and fill in the gaps.
Y aquí está nuestra agenda. Estamos
Here is our
empezando.
agenda. We're beginning now. We're going to be working in breakout groups during the meeting. Something different this time is that each breakout group is going to have a lawyer
Legal,
or legal aid person
relaciones,
to begin to build relationships with these folks, and also so that we can ask some questions.
algunos panelistas
We have some panelists
que van a ofrecernos
that will offer us some information, resources,
una perspectiva desde el
and
punto de
a
vista.
perspective from the law.
Los grupos de trabajo también van a ofrecer a todos la
The
oportunidad
breakout groups are going to offer us all the
y
opportunity
o continuar
to work on mutual aid or continue
relaciones uno con el otro.
to establish mutual relationships.
Entonces voy a pasarlo a Larissa Garzón.
I'll turn it over to Larissa Garzón so that she can give you some context about this series of meetings.
Buenas tardes a todos. Nuevamente, muchísimas gracias por
Good
estar aquí.
afternoon, everybody. Thanks for being here with us today.
Defensores de la comunidad latina en Carolina del Norte
Community Defenders.
que comenzó
Latino Community Defenders in North Carolina is a group that began when 4
católicas, la
organizations got together.
se unieron para crear un
Rural
plan
Forward is among them, and the governor's office
para los servicios de
began to try to improve
en el contexto
relations with the Latino community during the pandemic. Please speak a little slower for the interpretation. Sorry, I talk so fast.
Bueno, entonces, como decía,
So as I was saying, Mexican Caridad Católicas, the governor's office,
Rural Forward
and Rural Forward
para crear
got together
acerca
to make a plan about how to implement and improve the services available to Latino communities in the context of the pandemic and also natural disasters, specifically hurricanes. These organizations met and invited a diverse group of other organizations, including the Centro Unido Latinoamericano, East Coast Migrant Head Start, NC Field, North Carolina Inclusive Disaster Recovery Network, Manos Unidas, Sea Change, Telamon. All of these organizations are on the board of directors that now meets regularly. The objective is to create a statewide network with representatives from diverse groups that work with different parts of the population. And in the future will be in the different counties. It includes Latino as well as allies who are working in favor of the community, working for the community.
Muchísimas gracias, Larissa, y gracias por
Thank you,
estar.
Larissa, and thanks for being with us.
Entonces, como pueden ver aquí,
As you can see, this is our objective, to build a statewide network to support each other,
sirviendo a comunidades,
comprised of organizations to serve Latino communities and also individuals who are community leaders.
Por favor, Philip.
Next.
Entonces voy a pasarlo ahora a Maritza.
Now I will turn it over to Maritza Mata to give us a little summary of our first sessions.
Gracias, Sara.
Thank you, Sarah.
Mi nombre es Maritza
Good evening,
Mata.
everybody. I'm Maritza Mata,
Norte.
the Association of Mexicans of North Carolina. I will share a bit about what the first two meetings were like. The first one was on August 27. The topic was how leaders and community organizers respond to disasters in 2020. So it was not only Latino organizations, but also state agencies and community organizations that work with the Latino community. It was a rich conversation about how we respond to the Latino community. What came out of it was 4 topics. 1, communication, necessary communication within the community, bilingual materials, and also cultural competency. It's not enough to just share information in Spanish with the community. We also need cultural competency regarding the means of communication, content, and messenger.
Sí, claro. Gracias.
Can you speak a bit slower? Sorry. Oh, yes, of course. So taking all of these topics into consideration for the community, the second topic was resources. Latino communities need access to health services, access to public services, and access to disaster services.
Se discutió sobre la oportunidad y la habilidad de
More
obtener.
focus on the opportunity to have those resources in the Latino community. Also has to do with communication. It's not just communication, but also the resources. It all plays a very important role to reach the Latino community. Topic 3, equity. Latino communities are disproportionately impacted by disasters due to the lack of equitable conditions. Topic 4, partnership. It's about building relationships. We've done a lot to establish these alliances. And in the groups that we have, many times twice in a meeting, we're given 5 or 10 minutes to to establish alliances.
Pero a veces no es
We often meet each other at these sessions in North Carolina, but not always. There might be other people in the state who does similar work to us, but we don't know them. That was our first meeting. The second meeting was September 3rd, talking about responding to disasters in 2020. It was a very good conversation about how Latino organizations are working with public bodies to respond to the community. And the 4 topics again: communication, resources, equity, and partnership. Partnership is what was focused on in that meeting. The need to build alliances, not just among Latino organizations, but also agencies and any groups that offer any type of support for Latinos. We're very often doing things separately, and if we can get together, we can offer services together, which is much better for the community. Many of the barriers that an organization, a Latino organization, has, the public agencies can support, and again, the barriers that the public entities have, Latino organizations can help them overcome those. That seems like that's it, Sarah. I want to thank you above all for being here with us. And we are here for whatever you need. Thank you, Maritza.
Ahí está un poquito del contexto.
That's a bit of the context then. And I'm going to review our guidelines. The first is listen and show you here. It's a little bit different today because we're in Zoom. The second, it's okay to disagree. Attack problems, not people. The third, make space and take space. The third guideline means basically, for those of us like me, who are most comfortable talking in groups, we need to give space to those who aren't as comfortable talking in a group. For those of you who are timid, we invite you to participate and take up that space. Number 4, confidentiality. For us, that's basically, it means each one can share their own story, but we're not going to share the stories of others, especially not using names or identifying details. Normally, at the meetings that Rural Forward has, when we send the summary of the meeting, we include the contact information of each participant. If you do not want your information to be shared, simply let us know, and we can ensure that we don't share your information. The last one is use the tools we have. In Zoom, that means we're going to be in working groups, and we also want to invite you to use the chat box to ask questions, to connect with others, and to help us have a full record of the meeting. Also, when we are in breakout groups, we're going to ask one person in each group to take notes and share it later in the chat with the full group. Thank you very much.
Entonces, vamos a ir en grupos pequeños.
So we're going to go to small groups to get to know each other. And also remember that there's going to be a legal assistant or an attorney where in each group that you can connect to and ask questions of.
All right, everyone. I'm about to put everyone into breakout rooms. Introduce yourself, say hello, and Philip, if you would, there's a slide right there that should show you exactly a question that you might ask right at the end, which is, this is the third of our breakout groups. This is the third workshop that we've had. And so we're starting to move from ideas to action. So after you introduce yourself and you talk about where you're affiliated, you might want to talk about what changes, what specific changes you want to make, and who is it that you need to know or work with to make that happen. And if you make sure that any notes that are important, that you copy and paste them back into the main chat, we'll make sure we try to connect people and play matchmaker a little bit. Sound good to everybody? All right, bear with me. Let's see if the technology works. Ready, steady, we will see you in 10 minutes.
Tomamos un minuto para poner en el chat las temas centrales en los grupos.
If you'll take a second and put any key themes that you heard in the chat, that would be helpful. We make sure that anything that ends up in the chat, it helps us to put it into the meeting summary that you all receive after this. A reminder to reselect your audio channel and give our interpreters a second while they reselect their audio channels and make sure they're not on mute.
Muchísimas gracias a todos por poner.
Thank you so much for putting the principal themes in the chat that came out of the working groups.
All right. Y'all can keep doing that in there. I'm going to name a couple of things that I'm seeing. Language barriers or language justice continues to be something that is a theme across all of these workshops. Looking for housing for people in need, working around documentation issues, trying to figure out what services are available to people based on their documentation status. And I also saw Caroline Farmer, who's one of the reasons that these workshops are happening, already setting up the next topics for the next workshop. So I appreciate that. We're going to turn it over and have a little bit of conversation with some of the experts, some of the attorneys and paralegals that you met in the breakout rooms. You're going to be back in the same breakout rooms in a couple of minutes, so you'll get to continue those conversations and process through some of those ideas that you were thinking about, that you were talking about, that you've heard from the panel of experts. We've got a couple of different folks here today from Legal Aid North Carolina. They'll tell you about who they are and what they do. And we have folks from both the Disaster Services Unit and the Farm Workers Unit. We also have their colleagues from the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center. And I want to pause here for a second and make sure that if you were listening to the English channel, you should be hearing my voice. Can I get a thumbs up from everybody that they can hear me in the language of their choosing? Awesome. All right. My name, by the way, is Andy Schoenig. I work with Sarah at Rural Ford, North Carolina, and I'm the English facilitator, English language facilitator for today. Let's open this conversation up by asking Legal Aid and North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center to tell us a little bit about their roles in disaster response and recovery. I'm going to start by turning to Marion. Marion, tell us, what is Legal Aid as role in disaster response and recovery?
Okay, fantastic. And I don't know if now's a good time for the slides or not, but we prepared a few little slides. Legal Aid, thank you, translated. Legal Aid, we are a nonprofit law firm. We do provide free civil legal services to low-income people, to people who qualify. This is an effort to remove the barriers to, the legal barriers to economic opportunity. Anything, of course, that we share today is just for education and informational purposes. A big part of what we do at Legal Aid is help people become aware that they have a legal issue. Oftentimes people just know that for whatever reason they can't get something done. I work with the Disaster Relief Project. We are working with people who experienced catastrophic loss during Hurricane Florence 2 years ago. And many of them are still in their severely damaged homes. I have clients who say they have fallen through the floor up to their, up to their knees, or they step through their floor. And in other words, they haven't been able to get repairs done. That's just an example of the type of client that the Disaster Relief Project works with. And these clients are people who did not realize they had a legal issue. They were denied insurance, or they were denied assistance from FEMA. And now they're trying to apply for assistance through other programs. And they find that they do not know who owns their property. They do not know whose name is on the deed. They do not have a birth certificate. And so we are able to assist them. And thank you for advancing the slide. Here are some of the in a disaster, it's important for people to know what their rights are. They have a right to emergency alerts and evacuation information. They have a right to short-term aid and to shelter. And then after the disaster, you have rights to pursue an appeal if you're denied some kind of assistance through an agency, whether it's your insurance company or federal assistance. And in those cases, you may need a legal advocate. And that's Legal Aid. We can, and Andy, I can continue with all of our slides if you think this is the appropriate time.
Let me actually turn to your colleague, Catherine Asaro, who's with the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center. Catherine, y'all have a slightly different role to play, but you work hand in hand with Legal Aid. Tell us about that.
Yes. And I actually just sent you a link to our website. I didn't know if that would be a good thing to pull up, but if not, not a problem at all. Marion, that was great. And so the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center, we are a program of the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission. And the North Carolina Equal Access to Justice Commission is a commission of the North Carolina Supreme Court. So our executive director reports to the Chief Justice, Justice Beasley of the North Carolina Supreme Court. And the Pro Bono Resource Center, we're actually celebrating our 5th birthday early next year. And we came into being when, at that point, Chief Justice Martin saw a real need to try and get North Carolina attorneys to volunteer more time to help with unmet legal needs. And I was hired in 2018 after Hurricane Florence in a special round of funding to help with hurricane unmet legal needs. And that is my first foray into disaster legal services. And since then, I have worked in conjunction with Legal Aid, the North Carolina Bar Foundation, and other organizations across the state. We do not provide legal services, direct legal services ourselves. We coordinate pro bono projects to complement.
Catherine, you are a very fast talker because there's so much you're trying to get in. Slow down. Be kind to our interpreters.
Sorry, I am a fast talker. That's it. Sorry. I apologize to everyone. But so we do not provide direct legal services. We design pro bono projects to complement, and generally to complement our legal service providers, mostly Legal Aid. And our goal is to help people who have unmet legal needs, who do not necessarily qualify for legal aid but cannot afford legal help. And that is a huge, huge swath of people, as Miriam was saying, in North Carolina, with all the same issues that they are seeing. We try and organize volunteers to help with that. And we actually just launched a project with Legal Aid of North Carolina to help North Carolinians fill out rebuild applications, which is directly Hurricane Florence related. That felt slow to me, but was probably still pretty fast. I apologize.
It's something we're all getting used to. Let me ask, there's a question in the chat here that Beatrice brought up, and I'm going to turn to Ben to answer this question here, because one of the questions that has come up over the last 2 workshops and keeps coming up is, what services are available if you are not documented? So I'll ask you to answer that, but keep that in mind as you're answering this question. Ben, you've seen disaster legal services from a couple of different perspectives at the North Carolina Justice Center and now at Legal Aid working with the Farm Worker Unit. You came on just after Florence happened. So tell me, what kind of legal issues come up for Latino communities immediately and also ongoing?
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Let's see. Okay, yeah, I'm unmuted. So to Beatrice's question, she's right. You know, in the aftermath of a disaster, the benefits or the help that people with immigration status can get might differ from people without any immigration status. And then there's also shades in between, right? There's temporary guest worker visas who come here for a limited season to work, and they can get some, you know, benefits that others might not. I would encourage the folks on this call to think of, you know, a lot of times we think of people and, you know, whether that person has status or that person doesn't have status. But when you're dealing with a disaster like a hurricane, a lot of times you're not helping individuals so much as you're helping families, right? And so there are some creative things that you can do for people without status to help them and to alleviate some of the pain or some of the suffering that they might be experiencing in the wake of a hurricane. So one example of this would be, you know, a family of 4 where maybe the parents are lack documentation or lack status, but the kids were born here, and so they're citizens, right? And so if they have a social security number and you live in the same household, you could actually do a FEMA application through the child, and the beneficiary would be the child rather than the parents. And that can help qualify you, you know, for housing assistance, etc. But again, I mean, probably the best answer would be, you know, try to consult with the legal professional as quick as you can, who can kind of take into account immigration status. And Legal Aid is great at that, right? If you have status or you don't have status, or you fall somewhere in between, call us and ask us questions, and we can probably advise you the best of what options you have.
When you were working after Florence, tell me a little more about what specific issues came up with Latino families that you were working with. Larissa put one in the chat here that Latinos who are living in trailer homes can't put the trailer in their name because they don't have a driver's license, and a trailer is not considered a home, it's considered a vehicle.
Yeah, so property ownership issues were, you know, probably the biggest issue that I confronted. And, you know, a lot of times, right, if they don't have a driver's license, they can't register, you know, their vehicle. Or sometimes they don't take, because again, it's, you know, there might be cultural differences that they don't realize. But, you know, in the United States, they have a very, I would call it antiquated, really, system of kind of property registration. To where if you buy a mobile home, right, you might just show up, pay somebody $8,000 for the mobile home. They give you the key, and for all intents and purposes, you know, the mobile home is yours. You bought it. You paid $8,000. Maybe you even got a loan to buy the mobile home, but then you didn't get a title for the mobile home, right? And even if you did get a title, maybe you didn't register it. And then so when you're trying to go to FEMA and say, hey, I need money to fix my home, they're saying, okay, well, show us that you own the home. And you're left without any paper. On paper, you don't own the home. And so it's very difficult to do that. You know, so the best way to combat that is to be proactive, right? So rather than going into these communities and neighborhoods and homes after a disaster, we should be going in there 6 months before, right? So there's hurricane season and then there's preparation season. And if we're robust and diligent in preparation season, our hurricane season can be a bit better.
So I'm hearing, on the one hand, there's some policy changes that need to be made legislatively that would help Latino communities prepare better. On the other, at the same time, there's some preparation work that attorneys want to be building partnerships to be able to do. Let me ask Marian again, tell us a little bit more about what are some of the specific legal issues that Latino communities experience during hurricanes and also maybe during COVID-19.
I don't want to get too much, I don't want to get too much out of my depth. And I know there's some other legal aid folks here that may do a better job of this than me, but one of certainly language. And I think Ben just really described some of the issues with ownership and demonstrating ownership. Going back to the CDC moratorium on evictions, there's a specific form that you have to have that's very easy to find and fill out once you know about it, but you've got to have that information that because of COVID, evictions have halted. You've got to have that specific form, and you've got to, you know, assert that you've tried to pay your rent, and then you give this form to your landlord and to the courts. If you don't have that, it's simple information, but if you don't have it, you do not have access to that eviction moratorium, or you know, you don't have a right to, because from what I understand, evictions are happening right now because people do not have that form. So these are just some of the barriers I think that are endemic to a lot of people, but I think specifically to immigrants and people who do not perhaps speak English or fluent English.
So again, language barrier being a key one. I want to see, I've got two more questions before we go back to breakout groups here. I wanted to check in, Caitlin, you work with farm workers in particular. Is there anything that you wanted to share about issues specific to the clients that you serve? And I apologize.
Yeah, no, and Ben is also in the farm worker unit. I mean, we serve a lot of clients that are migrant farm workers, some of whom are here on a temporary agricultural visa, and that visa is tethered to one employer. That can put, migrant farm workers already have so much of their lives controlled by their employer that, you know, a professional or even someone working at a construction company or at a meat packing plant does not. Your ability to get mail, to go to the store, to get food, your paycheck, your housing, your ability to get medical care. And if your immigration status is also controlled by that employer after, during, in preparation for a disaster, that puts you in a very vulnerable position. So we've helped workers in the past that were here on that temporary agricultural visa program whose employers had unlawfully retained their passports or identification documents. We've also helped where they were in housing and that housing was not habitable. We've helped other farm workers where they were eligible for disaster unemployment benefits, but we went to help them apply in conjunction with the local unemployment office, who did a wonderful job of helping us sort of meet some literacy and language needs. But it turns out they had sort of been operating in an informal economy, and their employer had not been reporting their wages to the government. So it delayed their disaster benefits and getting their checks because there had to be a whole wage audit. So we've definitely seen for farm workers and other low-wage workers that a disaster can sort of reveal a really awful situation, or it could create the conditions for a situation where someone's rights are going to be violated. And that's where we've represented victims of human trafficking.
Catherine, with the Pro Bono Resource Center, y'all have a program that's specific to COVID-19 and to hurricanes. Can you just let people know what's available if you are a small business owner or if you're a nonprofit?
Absolutely. So we partnered with some large law firms. I'll speak to the COVID project first. And if you have a small business or a nonprofit, and by small, we define it as less than 25 employees, that's the only criteria, you can apply on our website, and there is attorneys, or there are attorneys that will give 45 minutes of free legal consultation for any COVID related question. And those questions, we started this in May, so they've run the gamut from government benefits to when things were reopening, issues that people had around liability and things like that. Now, unfortunately, we are moving to a lot of questions about bankruptcy and not being able to pay rents and things like that. But I will share that in the chat. That's open to anyone in North Carolina, like I said. And then in addition to that, we have a very robust Hurricane Florence helping program that is to help anyone who is not eligible for legal aid. We will try and pair you with a pro bono attorney to get you some of the help that you may need. Legal aid is always the line of first defense, and that's where you should call. But like we said, there's a large swath of people that can't get that help, and we don't have quite as many restrictions that way.
So I know that on this call, there are a lot of nonprofit organizations. There are some small business owners that if there are some of those issues coming up for you, that the North Carolina Pro Bono Resource Center might be a resource for you.
Absolutely, we would love that. We've helped, it's been, I think we're close to 170 small businesses and nonprofits so far, and we have capacity to help as many as needed. So please, please do. I will drop that in the chat right now.
Seeing some comments in the chat here that I want to encourage people to keep using the tools that we have, this group chat, a great conversation here about some of the issues, what's available for folks based on their documentation status, literacy issues and education levels. I'll keep that going. I got to get to probably what I think is the most important question is this, and I want to turn to Joanna Bravo on this one, which is about partnerships. That's the title of this workshop. How can partnerships with public interest law help support community needs? And talk a little bit about your role, because if I understand correctly, this is your role, is building those partnerships.
Sí, claro que sí. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Ya mencionó Ben y Caitlin.
As Ben and Caitlin have mentioned, and Marian, legal aid gives legal representation for free for farm workers. As was mentioned, for farm workers, there are lots of barriers and challenges in getting access to these resources. So part of our work is, well, there are lots of parts, but one part is going to the fields to teach farm workers about their rights and the resources that exist in the community. Coalitions that work with farm workers in different sectors, health, education, the legal aspect, us, the Episcopal organizations. There are these coalitions and networks that can distribute more of the materials that we try to share with our farm workers, but also create community and support, both individually and for the community. So I think this meeting helps to create these connections so that more other advocates can know about the services that we offer, so they can just continue sharing and creating the materials that are culturally appropriate. They can share our materials or those of other sectors, those created by other sectors. So there's learning, helping the community and teaching them, giving them materials. You can see, not in the moment, but beforehand, preparation and collaboration amongst everybody.
I heard awareness is a big piece of the work that you do. Are there any what does somebody who's never worked with an attorney before need to know about working with an attorney?
Claro que sí. Yo diría que uno, por ejemplo, bueno, tenemos que se tiene que.
Well, you have to begin to create this. Well, there's various barriers. Just because somebody comes to the office doesn't mean that there's going to be a case. They can ask questions. They can get education. They can.
Service providers.
Or the service providers. Sorry about my Spanglish. They can also call us to just ask questions. There's two sides of it. We want people to understand that we can give them services to help them, but the clients or the service providers have to know that they can't just ask questions. But we want to have 100% communication and trust, and we want everyone to know that we can support with different services, not just a legal case, but maybe they can do a confidential complaint with the Department of Labor, with the about pesticide use. There's different ways that we can help. There's different options for the services, and so we want them to know that we can serve them and empower them, and also just as much as the service providers.
Thanks for letting me catch up with the interpretation here. The resources that you shared there, the myths that, or not myths that you were dispelling, but helping people understand just what it's like to work with an attorney. Larissa Garzon putting in the chat, she likes that legal aid gives printed materials to distribute, because small organizations, printing costs money, and a big ask there for other agencies to do the same. We are going to head back into our breakout rooms, because I want to continue this question with that exact question here. This again is the key. What kinds of partnerships, what kinds of partnerships can you build with attorneys, with legal aid, to help advocate for your community? What questions do you still have about that? You're going to be in your same groups, and you will still have someone from the Pro Bono Resource Center, or from the North Carolina Bar Foundation, or from legal aid to help answer those questions. Sound good? It's 4:33, so we will be in our breakout rooms, it looks like, for just about 20 minutes. We'll come back, we'll wrap up, and a reminder again, if there are questions, if there are resources shared, take notes on that and share them back with the main group. We'll make sure it all goes out in the meeting summary with the slides and with the recording. I will see you all in just about 20 minutes. I think almost everybody is back. I apologize. Sometimes the breakout rooms just close immediately as opposed to giving you a 2-minute warning. That's my fault. Remember to reselect your audio channel.
Acuérdense de reseleccionar su canal de audio.
I see some of our small group facilitators putting in some of the notes. If there is anything that you didn't get a chance to say, take some time right now in the chat and add some of those in here. The more specific, if there are open questions that you didn't get answered, the more specific the better. We'll make sure that they get to hopefully someone who can answer them. We're getting ready to wrap up in the last 5 minutes, and I know people often have to sneak away as things finish. So I'm going to ask one more question to our panel, but as that's happening, please don't forget to help us know how we're doing, how did this work, what else we can do as we plan the next of these sessions. There's a link in the chat to an evaluation form. We'll keep putting it in there. Final question to our panelists here as we wrap up. I'm going to open it up and ask, how can communities prepare to avoid issues in the first place? What is the best resource to get prepared? What's the most important thing you need to do to prepare? Who wants to take that from our panel?
I can take it, Andy. So one of the things that Legal Aid did a good job on, I think, was, you know, after Florence, we started developing a disaster toolkit, and we had a staff member of our office. She was a Jesuit volunteer who went and did a listening tour, spoke with a lot of people, a lot of community members in English and Spanish, and she put together this toolkit that's phenomenally impressive. It's version 1.0 is currently out. We're currently revising it for version 2.0. I think the plan is for it to be a standing publication, you know, that we're constantly revising. And it basically breaks it down, and it's designed for service providers like that are on this call, right? And advocates who work for the farm worker community specifically, but a lot of it can be adapted for the Latino community generally. And it breaks it down into before, during, and after a disaster. And it kind of gives you step-by-step guidance or instructions about what you can do, you know, at each stage of the disaster. You know, so if we're talking about preparedness, we'd want to go look at the before the disaster part of the toolkit. And, you know, there's some step-by-step guidance about, you know, making sure that your house is registered, or that you have a title or deed to where you live, if that's possible, and stuff like that. You know, making sure that you have food supply for 72 hours, your ability to access shelters, your right to language access, stuff like that. That can be really helpful. If anyone wants to add to that, feel free.
Quick follow-up, is that toolkit available in Spanish?
Joanna, it will probably be better equipped to answer that than I am. Joanna, do we provide the toolkit in Spanish?
I don't think so. I think we just have it in English. Oh, am I muted?
Nope, we can hear you.
No, I think we just have it in English right now, but we can definitely, like I said, as we were doing version 0.2, we can probably translate it or not. But I just shared the link to the access to the toolkit on the chat for everyone.
There's a link in the chat there. Ben, if you can answer this in 30 seconds or less, a question from Victoria. How is the information you're talking about distributed within all of these different kinds of communities?
So a lot of the work that we've done is through a coalition that Legal Aid is a part of called the Farm Worker Advocacy Network, right? So much like this Defender network that y'all have put together, we have a farm worker network that's very similar, and we've distributed through them.
Farm Worker Advocacy Network, I'm hearing the power of networks to get information out and about and around. We have just about a minute and a half left. Sarah, take us home.
Entonces, primero quiero agradecer a nuestros
First, I'd like to thank our panelists and all of the participants. Thanks for being with us. It has been such a pleasure having everyone here for this three-part series. We know we've got some questions that still need answering. One group in particular asked about the available resources for legal services related to immigration and asylum, for example. We're going to continue by providing a summary of this meeting. And if you have resources, you can share them with us. We will distribute them to the group. And I hope that this is not the last time we all get together. We have another opportunity for participation in a listening session. The Office of Pandemic Recovery for the state of North Carolina And sorry,
El nombre.
I
Andy,
think I didn't say the name of it right. Andy.
NC Pro, North Carolina Pandemic Recovery Office.
Pro.
Gracias. Entonces, una sesión de escucha con esta oficina y les mantendremos al
So we will keep you posted
información.
with all that information. Also, we will be sending everybody a summary of the session, the last session, and that will include contact information and the resources that were mentioned. So thank you so much to everyone.
La encuesta.
We put the survey in the chat where you can give us your opinions about these sessions. Once again, I'd like to thank everybody. Thank you so much. And take care.
We will be in touch.
Stay well. We will be in touch with everybody.
You guys are awesome. Thank you.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Bye, adiós.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Edes.
Bye.
Pronto.
Bye.